everyone. Welcome to the Powering Through a Pivot session. I'm Courtney Reddy, and I lead the Target Incubator program. The Target Incubator is an accelerator focused on supporting entrepreneurs building businesses that are better for people and better for the planet. Incubator is part of a portfolio of programs at Target Accelerators that help founders go further and faster by providing a network of mentors, a cohort of peers, and access to Target's resources. As part of the session today, I'm honored to welcome two Target Accelerator alumni who recently participated in the Target Incubator program, Reyanne Mustafa and Kristian Krugman, who are the founders of SOULMUCH. SOULMUCH is on a mission to reduce food waste and create healthy organic snacks and reallocate nutritious food into the hands of consumers. Ray serves as CEO of SOULMUCH. She is a nutrition enthusiast and studied food and nutritional science at SDSU. She is a strong believer that we cannot have healthy food without healthy soil, and we cannot have healthy soil without practicing sustainability. Kristian serves as COO of SOULMUCH. She studied environmental science and psychology at SDSU. She's interested in educating people on how environmental issues we are facing most often are the results of our own actions and how we can make simple actions that will help us get closer to a cleaner earth. Ray and Chrissy, thank you so much for joining us today. The title of this panel is about powering through a pivot, but before we go deeper, I'd like for you to tell us a little bit more about yourselves and what made you decide to start SOULMUCH.
Thank you so much, Courtney. To start off, so we both were servers at a restaurant, actually, while we were still studying at STSU. And while there, we saw how much food was actually at the back end of the night when the restaurant was closed, was just simply surplus. And together we looked at what we could do to actually solve that problem. So today, what we currently are doing is partnering with those restaurants, dehydrating their cooked rice, grinding it into a flour that we bake into delicious vegan, gluten-free cookies. And that was our start in the very beginning.
Wonderful. I love that. I love that you all took the initiative to see a problem and then take action and do something about it. How did you know in those early days that you could build a business behind it?
Yeah, so it was, at first we didn't think, business did not come to our mind at all. At first we saw this problem and we kind of kept pointing the finger at every single person except ourselves. Like we kept asking the chefs why they're not stopping this from happening. We were questioning the managers why this is, continuing again and again. And we kept pointing at everybody else except ourselves. And it kind of got to the point where we're like, if not us, then who? And if not us, what if it's no one? And that realization that kind of struck, it was, I think for quite a bit of time, at least I know personally speaking, I have almost the bystander effect, right? You see something wrong and you assume someone else will take responsibility and change it. But it got to the point where we're like, we're the most passionate about sustainability in this restaurant. If we don't do something to fix it, no one else will. So initially we thought, let's create a nonprofit and give this food to, the food banks or do something along with it, and again deviating the responsibility not on ourselves of giving it to someone else. But then we joined an accelerator program on our campus that actually allowed us to redefine what we thought as business, where we could actually use business to build a better world. And it I would say shattered our stigmas that we had that, yay, you can make money and create impact at the same time, right? Profit and purpose can be two players on the same team and you don't have to choose one against the other. And the more that we sell, the more money we make, the more impact we have. And I think when that all of a sudden clicked, we're like, okay, let's do this business.
I love it. That's incredible. And so walk me through what were the first steps? You're a part of this accelerator, you see this issue, you're like, I can't be a bystander with all of this food waste. We need to take action. What did you do to get your business started and off the ground in those early days?
Yeah, so like I said, we joined the accelerator program, and I like to say that they essentially adopted us like startup virgins, because that's not what we studied. We were not in business school or anything like that. And they kind of give us a crash course MBA and allowed us to learn about the lean business model, right? Where you build something and test it and send it to market and then pivot and innovate. So that was really helpful for us. And I think the best advice that we got within that accelerator was instead of trying to build something and sell that to people, find out what people want and then create that. So we initially thought, okay, let's create a protein powder, right? Like we can dehydrate this rice and this quinoa and dehydrate juice pulp, and you got your greens and your grains, and this is a genius idea, and it's like this amazing superfood powder. And then we were like, wait, people don't actually want protein powder. There's enough on the market. It's expensive to get into. When people find a brand that they like, they're pretty loyal to it. So it's really hard to tap into it. So then we have to do like hundreds of customer surveys and figure out what people want. And we realized they want like a fast, convenient, on the go product that still is healthy and sustainable. So that's kind of where the cookie idea kind of came from and birthed. But yeah, we kind of started that and started slowly selling at farmers markets. And then we got into a few specialty retail locations, things like gyms, yoga studios, rock climbing places, like that type of stuff. We launched our online store, so started selling online. So small little revenue channels where we were kind of tapping into. And then catering, believe it or not, was actually one of our best revenue channels that we didn't really anticipate going into it. But yeah, slowly started to kind of discover where we can kind of tap into within our own community.
And did you ever have any doubts when starting this company, taking that entrepreneurial leap and saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do?
I think for us, like the only doubt would come from like, could this work? And in the very beginning, like the problem was always there. So we knew like, and we were passionate, and we had like a small community that at least like the adoption community of like, who would it like accept any, like this food product, if it was a protein powder, if it was a bar, if it was a cookie. And once we really dialed in, and it took a minute to actually get that product to actual market. And in that moment, it was like within the first 6 months. So I personally was like, there's so much, like, so much excitement to like live for. And like every day was like a new challenge. So in the very beginning, I would say there wasn't like the doubts in that sense at all, because we knew the supply chain so well. We were in that restaurant industry, and there was definitely challenges, but I think we like leaned on like experts and mentors, and every time like we couldn't solve something together, we had somebody to lean on. So yeah, and we didn't know any different. I didn't know any different, at least going into it. So
to piggyback off of that, I think being naive is the best thing possible, because I think the fact that we didn't know how much it was gonna require, all the steps, the hurdles, I think that was the biggest blessing that we didn't realize that we had, because we were so excited about this, and we were like, oh, this is gonna totally work. We're totally gonna be like the next Cliff Bar, eco-friendly, and this and that. And I think that really, really helped us propel us. But I will say that there was one moment, I think in particular, that was extreme pivot game changer for us. It was early stages when we're like trying to develop the recipe. Chrissy's like a master when it comes to operations and permitting and logistics, and I would say I'm on more like the creative recipe development side. And when we were trying to create a formula to see if this could even work, right? So this is like just an idea we propagated in our mind and hadn't actually executed it. There was one thing in particular, this story was really funny. We got invited to a vegan food blogger event. So all these like Instagram bloggers were going to be there. They invited us to come. They heard about what we were trying to do. And this was like our moment to shine and to enter in the market and like show all these Instagrammers, like they'll promote our product and so on and so forth. And we're getting ready, and I'm making the first batch of cookies, and then it comes out, and we're kind of running late, and we're a little bit high stress, and the cookies come out and they're burnt. And I remember just being like, I'm like so frustrated. And I remember just like Chrissy trying it, and she was like, yeah, they taste okay, like they're not bad. And I was like, okay, they have to be amazing, like we can't sell this. And I just remember breaking down, throwing it on the floor, like pretty much crying in my apartment kitchen, like shaking and just being so, in that moment I truly had doubts. I was like, is this even possible? We've convinced so many people that we have this incredible idea, but can we actually do it? We haven't even made a product that's even worth selling. And I remember just like crying and shaking and screaming and just breaking down. And I think that, as cliche as that might sound, but that breakdown moment forced us to be like, okay, we got to rethink this whole thing, right? Like we changed the way that we were like dehydrating and drying the rice, and it was game changer. But I don't think we would have ever landed that if it wasn't for that breakdown moment where we were doubting. And so I think definitely the doubts come and go in waves, but I think being so naive was the best thing possible. And then using those really low moments, and if you do feel those moments of doubts, using that to kind of propel you to be like, okay, let's rethink how we're doing things, because this is not working, and how are we going to move forward from there?
I love that. Yeah. And can you share a little bit more about like, what was the timeline of this? Like, at what point were you in your business? Like, how far into it? Speaking to really like where you are today.
Yeah, so I would say we had an ideation phase for about 4 to 5 months. It was just ideation, and then it was 5 months of like recipe testing and development of my side. And then meanwhile, Kristi, we divided and conquer. She was doing like permitting. How the heck do you get licensing and contracts with all these restaurants to make sure we're doing this okay and all that stuff. And then I would say around the 5 to 6 month mark of like testing and testing and testing, like every single day I'm going and like shoving cookies down my friends' throats, like, hey, tell me what you think about this one. Tell me what you think about this one. Like, right, making them do like taste tests and stuff. We get a call from the San Diego farmers market director, and he's like, hey, a spot opened up at the farmers market. I saw you guys on the waiting list. Can you come this week? And we're like, yes, yeah, we can definitely come. Mind you, we've never cooked a big batch of cookies before. We've never cooked in a commercial kitchen before, but we're like, okay, that was what we needed. And we just said yes, even though at the time we did not have the supply to do it, but we just did it. And I don't know, we just figured it out. And ever since then, we did farmers markets for about 1.5 years or so. And I would say we started at the end of 2017. So
wow,
that's the first cookie.
Yeah, I love that. And many cookies have been eaten since then. I'm sure your friends are like you're their favorite.
Yeah, that's how I make friends. I win them over. We win them over.
Awesome. Well, I know you all have a really awesome story around the impact of your business model and how you rescue food and how that's evolved as you've grown. Before we get into the pivot, which is really kind of one of the highlights of this panel, wanted to first hear a little bit more about like the sustainability element of your supply chain and how you think about that and how that's evolved from those early days testing recipes and how you've built that out over time.
Yeah, so for us, obviously the problem coming from restaurant surplus or just surplus and overall. So we first started partnering actually with our employer. They were our first onboarded partner. So that actually helped us with the recipe development before we even launched our company. So it just started with the one restaurant where we actually collect the rice, dehydrate it, and mill it into flour. And then while building our product line, we looked at what other foods are wasted. So then we looked at the juice that was being made in our own, the restaurant we were working in. And where it was just taking smaller batches of the juice pulp. We then expanded into a larger logistic operation. So a company that distributes to 5 hubs around the city of San Diego, and where they're doing much larger quantities and need a solution. Unfortunately, all these partners that I'm talking about, they don't have a sustainable solution. So unfortunately, there's no industrial composting in San Diego or in a lot of metropolitan cities. So what we're doing is we're trying to fill that void, food that would go to landfill, that would produce methane if it does hit landfill and decompose. So it's great, it's biodegradable, it's a great resource for soil enrichment if done so correctly. So unfortunately, it does go to landfill and produce that methane, which for us, or at least for me, is a big driving factor, is the climate impact. So we're able to do that. And then some really cool, like tangible sustainability aspects, even what our consumers I see get really excited about, like even for an online order or a large subscription or catering order, we do like what we call like a sustainability report. So we can calculate down to how much one cookie can save pounds of food, to the water to grow the crop. Rice is a very thirsty crop. So if you use all these resources to grow something and then you just end up wasting it, you're literally wasting the resources going into that, and then down to the methane that ends up being outputted. So super exciting. We've rescued over 15,000 pounds of food to date. And that's without we have a new ideation of where we'll be able to expand to, and hopefully even more food on a monthly and yearly basis. So.
Yeah, and to kind of again piggyback off that, I always say to people, like, we were not a cookie company, we were not a company, we didn't like come together and be like, hey, let's start a company and how can we be sustainable. It was more like we were not a cookie company seeking upcycled ingredients. We were straight up waitresses working in the restaurant industry, seeking a solution to this food waste problem that we witnessed again and again and again, and that's how SOULMUCH was birthed. So it was almost like we had to create this, otherwise nobody else would solve this problem. Like, and so I think that that's kind of been the core fundamental aspect of who we are even today. And so that's kind of led us in every direction of where we're going, is always going back to that. Is like, we started this because we saw a problem and we were fixing food waste and trying to, you know, upcycle it into a better purpose. So it kind of was always the North Star from day one.
I love that. Yeah. And I know as a recipient of cookies myself, I love the packaging, being able to see how much of a positive impact my purchase of cookies had on the planet. So I am really grateful for all the work that you're doing. And as you know, Target Incubator, when you all applied to the Target Incubator program, I know you were in full cookie mode. And then COVID hit and you all had to take a big turn in terms of thinking about your business and what the future would look like for SOULMUCH. So could you share a little bit more of that story for our audience?
Yeah.
Right.
To give a little bit of context, leading up to the pandemic and how we have had to transition, 2020 was actually like our our year, unfortunately. So like leading into it, we were really expanding into the partners we were partnering from. So we went from like 2 to 5 and continuously seeking new restaurant partners. Our juice suppliers had actually transitioned to like even more partners or more scale. So we had so much surplus of like rescued food, and we were collecting the most amount we had ever collected January and February of this year. And then even as things started to transition across the US and globally, I specifically remember one week in March, and it went from like Monday where everything was normal. I think that Friday before we were supposed to do a cool expo, and somebody called me and they're like, "How is San Diego?" I was like, "Oh, you know, we're being cautious, but like things are going." And by that Tuesday, we had literally lost like over thousands of dollars in pre-ordered catering orders, and then the CDC recommending no more than 250 gather, and so which trickled that. And then we went to a farmer's market, which had some of our revenue. And on a Wednesday evening and by Friday, like everything had closed down. So for us, like that week felt like a month. I feel like a lot of people talk about during COVID, how time has like changed so drastically. And so even in that moment, just like, what do we do? And then within the next few weeks, unfortunately, restaurants had shut down. So that transitions into where we are today. And we were on track and we had so much surplus, thank goodness, because those orders hadn't gone through. And so we had that food rescued, and we're like, okay, we'll see how we weather this. And unfortunately, we didn't know how long, or we had no idea that restaurants would have been closed for so long. So week after week, we slowly started to see our rice scale down, and we're like, oh, something that was such a surplus and almost never ending became, something that was a major issue within our company. So,
and that was like a core fundamental of who we are, right? Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't really make sense for us to still sell, like if we bought rice and made cookies with it, we're not technically a cookie company, we're a food rescue company. So we had this moral dilemma, like, do we buy rice flour to sustain our company in the meantime while we have this bridge? What do we do? That's kind of, so, and it was interesting because to speak about pivots and taking advantage of current market trends, we saw this huge rise in everyone trying to be a home baker in the beginning of COVID, and you couldn't find flour anywhere. Target, as you know, like it was really hard to find it in every grocery store. So we're like, great, we're already making flour as part of the process to sell cookies. This is the time to launch our upcycled brown rice flour. Let's do it. And we did, and it did really, really well. But that ended up drying our entire supply that we saved for a rainy day. And then at the same time, simultaneously, as our brown rice flour sales were going up, restaurants were shutting down. So then we had this huge gap where we're like, oh, shoot, like we're kind of depleting that entire supply. So then we were again forced to like, okay, let's hit the pavement and rethink everything. And yeah, that's kind of what we've been doing the last few months.
Right, absolutely. And I'm sure, I mean, there's just so much there that you really had to think about in terms of your business model, why you started this company. Ray, you mentioned your North Star a little earlier ago around like what type of company you wanted to be and how you wanted to think about your impact. As you have been looking at different options and trying to understand like what the future of the company will hold, what has been your North Star moving forward?
Yeah, so when the pandemic was getting worse, restaurants were shutting down. We, like I said, we're just kind of in this really weird place where we didn't know what to do, because we're like, okay, well, our whole business was based on solving, this food waste within the restaurant industry. And now the problem is kind of solving itself. I mean, they're shutting down, but, it's kind of in a weird way solving itself. But it's forced us to seek alternative outlets, because we knew that restaurants are not the only places wasting food. So that forced us to seek alternative places that are. And so that's kind of where we landed on grocery stores and different types of industries, food industries that are wasting food. And so that's kind of now always been our mind. Well, okay, maybe we're not a restaurant food upcycling company, but maybe we're just a food waste upcycling company, right? Like our whole mission is making sure that good, nutritious food is not being wasted, whether that's in the vessel of a restaurant or a grocery store. We're willing to rescue it in all shapes and forms. And cookies was the first product that we launched to make, to create that movement, but we were planning on doing other products of other things that we can rescue. So in COVID, we started interviewing grocery stores and started asking them like, hey, what types of produce can we upcycle? What types of things do they throw away? What types of products can we rescue from them? And we found a lot of it was like fruits and vegetables. And so now we're kind of brainstorming different ideas of what we can do with all this beautiful edible food, like a browning banana or a bruised apple that's still beautiful and edible. And we're like, we're already dehydrating food to begin with. We might as well dehydrate these foods, make them shelf stable. And whether we create ready to go meals for people, or you simply just add water to like a oatmeal with bananas and apples and fruits, or like even an entirely ready to go meal, that's kind of something that we're testing now and kind of on the forefront of, which is a completely different change of cookies. But I think that it's allowed us to almost be zombie proof in a sense, where now we're constantly having to change with whatever times are forcing at us. And I think we always mention this too, like if there's no food being wasted, we've done our job. Like we're good to shut off the lights and close the doors and start new and do something else. But until that day happens, we will continue to exist, and we'll continue to hopefully be a sustainable alternative for any food industry, whether that is restaurants, grocery stores, or who knows what else.
I love that. That's incredible. And what I really appreciate about your company is how user-centered you've been at every step of the way, from the very early days of having your friends try your cookies, test them out, give you feedback, to now actually going and speaking to the people who are managing the supply chain of grocery stores and really understanding where there's opportunities to really have an impact. So definitely want to applaud you all for getting out there. And with that, I'm curious, like as co-founders, there's probably many people who are listening in who have co-founders. And when you hit these turbulent times, how do you all really try to navigate and make sure you're both on the same page for what the next chapter of your company will look like moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of really hard talks. I think a lot of time also to reflect, but I think having, and I am plugging Target Incubator, and purely this is just so genuine. I think we were in the Target Accelerator at the same time that this was happening, and we were getting guidance from all of the different mentors to help us through all of this. So I think that really, really helped. It was almost like counseling and mentorship and therapy all wrapped up in one. So I say that definitely really did help. Having a lot of hard talks, truly just asking the elephant in the room questions like, hey, are you still motivated? Like, are you okay? Like, what are you thinking? Like all those really hard questions that seem easy to say, but really hard to actually do when it's that like raw and vulnerable times. I would say that'd probably be on my end.
Yeah. And I think also for us, like, or at least for myself, is that it's always like applying it, like Ray said, like we're still a food upcycling company. And as much as like we're happy that like some aspects there is a reduction of food waste and we are still collecting, but it's at a smaller scale, that there are so many different avenues, and that like at the end of the day, like it's the problem that like at least like I fell in love with and like we fell in love with, and that's why we're creating it. And like time and time again, we just say we're a food upcycling company, and so there's almost endless possibilities of what that can look like. And so it's almost exciting in that sense that like, yes, it sucks. The thing that was our bread and butter, we knew in and out, we saw the vision, we saw a future, like that disappeared overnight. And that does hurt at some sense. And it does create like, friction amongst like just what you were doing, but it's, taking a step back and was like, okay, what else could this look like? And like Ray said, going to those customers, asking, it's not a cookie now, but what is it? Like, so, and going back to even partnering with new supply chain, like grocery stores, it's like exciting as much as it is work, it is hard, but we've done that once before. So it's like finding a new way to apply your model and just modifying it. And I think that's also what like fuels me. It's like, we're not starting from zero. It feels like it sometimes, but it isn't. It's just modifying your model to like actually make it more impactful and new exciting things. So yeah.
You always say, I love it. She's always like, great, don't fall in love with the solution, fall in love with the problem. And as the creative, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, we're going to create backpacking food. It's going to be amazing. And I fall in love with the solution that I kind of hype up in my mind. And I think you often remind me, it's like, hey, this is the problem we're solving, like fall in love with the problem, and it doesn't matter what the solution is. So I think that that's definitely really helped.
I love that. I think that's great advice for anyone listening who might be in the middle of trying to make a pivot or understanding what's next for their business. And I know that like from each point in the business, I think you as a co-founding pair have really been able to show how resilient you are, from the burnt cookies before you were about to go meet with those folks all the way to today having to rethink your business model and really see where there's future opportunity. I'm curious if you could also share with the group, like, what advice would you offer other founders who are really struggling with this pandemic and the impact it's had on their business?
Yeah.
One thing that I've been doing is I've been listening to a lot of different successful founders talking in this time and different podcasts. One of them is Simon Sinek, who I'm obsessed with. And something that he constantly talks about is like, in these times, it is so black and white. There are companies that are going to rise to the top, and there's companies that are going to dissolve. And the companies that are rising to the top are the ones that are being so keen and truly being aware of what market trends are really happening right now. And he gave a really good example of like, he's like, for example, my entire business, I'm a public speaker, I'm a guest speaker. I get paid thousands of dollars to show up in front of Google and Apple and give these massive grand talks. And he's like, I obviously can't do that. I can't even travel at the moment. And so his entire business and all of his staff were kind of questioning and really in this limbo space. And then they quickly pivoted and are like, okay, well, what's your why, right? Like, is that the why, is the public speaking, or is the why to ignite inspiration in other people? So he's like, it doesn't matter if I'm doing that on stage or if I'm doing that behind a screen. It's the same thing. That why is still true, but the vehicle in which we're doing it is different. And I think that that's something that we've kind of tried to harness within ourselves. So I guess any advice is like truly identifying what it is and why it is you're doing it, and realizing that maybe what you were doing in the past is not going to be what you can continue to do in the future. But if you continue to understand what it is and why it is that you're doing it, it doesn't matter how you do it. So I think that was advice that I got that really resonated well with us. That has allowed me, that I hope I can share that with other people.
Yeah, I think even going off of that, it's like finding there are a lot of places where, like, even us, like what we were doing, like there's just not even a space for that. There's no public gatherings. There's no, like, we were talking earlier about like how weddings were such a cool thing, like gatherings, and but there are opportunities, and finding like what markets are thriving and how you can transition what you were once doing into a new kind of vehicle to get you there. So yeah, I think that would be like the best way, and that's kind of what we were able to do. And it really does go back to like, what are you doing and like what problem are you solving at the end.
I love that. And the impact you all have been able to have is incredible. So I just want to thank you both so much for joining us today, sharing more about your story, offering your words of wisdoms for powering through a pivot, given everything you all have been faced with your business, but you still have kept sustainability and impact front and center. So just want to thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Awesome. And then I also just want to thank everyone on the call who tuned into this session to listen and learn more about SOULMUCH. Just want to say thank you so much for joining. For those interested in the Q&A, Chrissy will be available for 15 minutes immediately following in the community lounge. We also encourage folks to check out Target Accelerators and learn more at targetaccelerators.com/C-V-Future. There you'll find the Twin City Startup Week website where you can learn more about our programs, sign up for office hours, shop our alumni products, including SOULMUCH cookies, and then grab some digital freebies. So thank you so much for all joining us today, and look forward to seeing you in the community room.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.